Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Thanks once again for taking the time out of your week to listen to this podcast. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your effort in sharing this around with all your friends, those of you that are new here, or even those of you that are returning. I'll ask the favor that I do at the start of every episode. Make sure you're subscribed on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. So Apple, Spotify, Google. Those of you that have listened for a while will know that obviously I'm not great at putting the video versions up of this or dropping episodes on social media. So to be subscribed to the podcast platform that you listen to this on, you will be notified every time I put a new episode up, which I've been pretty consistent with over the last 2 years. So every Saturday morning Australian time, I drop a new episode on a new topic, sometimes revisiting an old topic that I've covered off over the last 2 years, especially 2 years in. I'm not finding it hard to come up with new topics, but you're going to find there are some recurring themes that I talk about. So back to what I was asking, please make sure you are subscribed. Please make sure you share it around with anybody who you think might get some value or get some entertainment out of this podcast that I put out each week. So hopefully I'm giving you some valuable, useful information or just covering off some topics to let you know that in this roller coaster that is dad life, you are not alone with sometimes those feelings that you feel, those negative feelings, negative emotions. It is something that we all go through in our own little way. And that was kind of the whole point in me starting this podcast. I know I went through a pretty dark period when I first became a dad from an emotional standpoint, not from a life standpoint. Like, it was still a wonderful, wonderful time for me, but there was a lot of feelings that I was going through that firstly I didn't know how to deal with. And I kind of felt a little bit alone. And one of the points of me starting this 2 years ago was to hopefully put some information out there, firstly, that other dads can use and help them get back on track, specifically with their health and athleticism, because that is my area of expertise. That's what I've been lucky enough to help and coach people do for the last almost 15 years now. But also just talk about my journey as a dad, my journey in learning as a human being, as a father, as a husband, and just somebody who is looking to continually grow, and just talk about some feelings and emotions that I've had to deal with over the years and some things that I've done to deal with that. And hopefully the information that I've put out and the episodes that I've done have been able to help you, have been able to maybe give you some things that have allowed you to be able to change maybe some aspects or some areas of your life that you would like to change. But most importantly, let you know that you're not alone in this. Reach out and talk to somebody if you are feeling very heavy, if you are feeling in a dark spot. Seek professional help if you need to. There is absolutely no shame in that. And just reach out and talk. As dads, it is very, very easy for us to isolate ourselves and feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. So that's probably the biggest message I want to get across with this. Now, I digress for a little bit. I'm going to get back on task for this week's topic. So just on the theme of self-improvement, I guess, is probably the best way to do it. On the theme of undertaking change, things take time. And this is something that as I get older, as I get further into my life and into the different journeys that I've had over my life, it's something that I am getting a much different perspective on. If I look at it from a strictly coaching standpoint, it's been something that I have always advocated in one way, shape, or form. Like, things take time, and you have to be prepared to buckle up. You have to be prepared to lock in for the long term if you want to actually implement sustainable change. And when it comes to the health industry, the wellness industry, there are a lot of people selling quick fixes. They are selling extremes on any end of the spectrum. Doesn't matter whether it comes to training, doesn't matter whether it comes to nutrition, doesn't matter whether it comes to mindset. Like, they are talking about, there are a lot of people out there, and these things sell very quickly and very well on the extremes of this is going to help you change X in 30 days or change X in 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And I've done and sold and coached people in 6 and 8 week transformation programs. We've done that in the past. Do they work? For some people, yes. But the big thing, if you're going to undertake something like that, and now we're into February this year, right? So we're kind of past that New Year's resolution standpoint. If changing your health and well-being is something that's been on your radar since the start of the year, and we are starting to actually get those people that have undertaken, this is from my experience as a coach, and seeing what happens like with other personal trainers and just having coached thousands of people, we are starting to get to that point where people are going to start to drop off because that initial motivation of what has waned. Maybe they haven't been as disciplined as they needed to with the actions that they needed to take in that first kind of 4 to 6 week period. So they start to drop off. And the biggest point that they drop off on is they drop off on the daily and the weekly actions that they need to take in order to elicit the change that they're looking for. And a lot of that comes from the mindset of quick fix, that whatever I want to change is going to be changed and or fixed, quote unquote, in 6 weeks or in 8 weeks. And the fact is, it's just not. Even if you're doing a 6 week or an 8 week challenge, you are going to need to, at the end of that, figure out a way to adapt that long term. And there's a saying that I use, and I'm sure I didn't make it up. I may have, but I'm pretty confident I didn't. I'm not smart enough to do that. And it's whatever actions, habits, and behaviors you use to get a change, you need to continue to use to keep that change. And what I mean by that is if you do something extreme, so let's say you are trying to elicit a transformation result within your body. You want to lose X amount of kilos or whatever the case might be. And you do something extreme for 6 weeks. You're training 6 times a week. You're eating 1,200 calorie meal plan, which has just been given to you. Like, you're doing this and you're able to do it for 6 weeks and you're able to achieve a goal that you want. And you should feel proud of the work that you've done it. But when you undertake something like that, what you need to understand is that on the back end of that 6 weeks, if you want to keep that result and you want to stay at that point, you have to continue to do whatever actions you've done over that 6 weeks in order to maintain it. Otherwise, there's going to be a correction. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to swing completely back to your starting point, especially if you continue to do something. You may go back to doing something in a little bit more in moderation. So maybe training 3 times a week, just being mindful of what you eat, and just doing those things. And what you may see, especially if weight loss has been your goal, it will swing back to a particular point, but it will not go back to a starting point because you're still doing more than what you did from the start. And what I notice for a lot of people is that plays on them mentally. They get really down, they get really depressed because they haven't set that expectation for themselves, and they haven't really had this inherent understanding of, I've done this extreme action for this first 6 weeks, and there's almost this expectation that they should be able to dial it back afterwards and keep that same result that they've achieved. And the reality is that's just not the case. A better mindset to go into that would be the long-term one. Understanding that it's going to take some time, understanding that you need to focus on those daily and weekly wins, and then doing it in a sustainable way. Now, that initial result that you've got, will it be achievable doing those particular actions, habits, and behaviors? Potentially. Will it take longer? More than likely, yes, it's going to take a little bit longer. However, there is not this up and down yo-yo effect that happens all the time, and especially at this time of year with a lot of people who have used the changing calendar to start something new and try and better themselves. And I'm not somebody who is going to rag on somebody for having a New Year's resolution. I actually think that if that's what you need in order to make a shift and make a positive shift in your life, all power to you. Go ahead and do it. Don't let anybody tell you it's shit or you need to, or you shouldn't have done it, because I don't believe that's the case at all. I don't think you need to wait for the new year in order to make the change, but if that is the catalyst that you use in order to make that shift, then I think that's fantastic and amazing. But I think one thing and a trap that a lot of people run into is taking that short-term mindset to something that really needs to be addressed on a long-term scale. Now, we can also unpack that a lot further and really dial that back to the fact of like looking at what is the goal that we actually want to achieve, and is that goal going to be sustainable within our lifestyle? Because sometimes we may actually have to reassess the goal based off the priorities that we've got. And I've spoken a lot on this about understanding your priorities and understanding the type of person you are so that you can better work out where things are going to fit into your life. I think being physically fit and physically active is something that every father, every mother, every person should be doing. And they should be taking action within their life and do it. That's my personal opinion. How that looks for each individual is going to be very different, because I still think that it needs to be something you enjoy. I still think that it needs to be something that is sustainable in your life, whether that's training 2 times a week, 3 times a week. Some people might be able to train 5 or 6 times a week, but it's going to be very different. But I think that every single person needs to be doing something to keep them physically active, keep them physically strong, and keep them cardiovascularly fit, because that is going to allow them to be a better participant in society and be a more active person in the life of their family, and also keep them around longer, keep them healthier for longer. And at the end of the day, that's the end game for everybody, right? Like, we want to be around for the family, for our family and those that we love, for as long as possible, and be as independent as we can for as long as possible. So I think that that's important, but how that looks in your life is really going to be based off your hierarchy of importance, based off your priorities. Like, where does that fit in your priorities, and understanding that, and then understanding the type of person you are to work out what thing you need to be doing which is going to suit your personality best or suit your needs best. Yes, it's going to be related to your goal, but I think there are other things in play that we need to understand, because I think if we can get those things right, then when we go in to make these changes, we go into that with that long-term mindset, and we understand that things are going to take some time, because everything that you are going to be able to keep and that is going to be worth having is going to take some time to build. And this is something that I've been a little bit reflective on over the last 12 months. I look back and I look at an in-person business that we built that took us a decade to build. And while I'm in it, it doesn't feel like it took that long, but it did. Like, it took 10 years. I look at a hobby that I've got like jiu-jitsu, and I look at the fact that I've now been doing it for 7 and a bit years, and you look at, and it's taking, I'm still constantly learning, and I think about when I started as a white belt 7 years ago, the massive improvement that has happened since that point. But it doesn't seem like I've been doing it that long, but there's times where it does. But it's taken time to get to this point where I'm still learning, but I'm better than what I was, and you will get better every day. But and that's one thing. And then I look at training, and training for me has been part of my life for 20 plus years now. And I look at the different variations of training and the different iterations I've done and the different goals I've had over the years, from football to weightlifting to powerlifting to doing a bit of CrossFit in the middle there. And I look at the fact that, like, I can now step under a barbell, only training 2 to 3 times a week with jiu-jitsu as my main goal, and I'm still able to squat 100 kilos for a set of 5 at 70 odd kilos body weight. But I'm only able to do that And they're not great numbers, right? Like I've squatted a lot more than that over the years. But to be able to do that after really not being really consistent with that movement, being consistent with training, but not being consistent with that movement, that all comes about from time in the trenches and stacking the little wins over the years. And doing things, and there's been times and there's been things that I've done where I have taken a short-term mindset and then I've fallen off the back end. And then I've had to learn from it. I've had to learn how to get back on track. And I think for a lot of people that listen to this podcast, and especially those that are maybe looking to make a change but are struggling to make it, I think one thing where it all falls down is we put too much pressure on ourselves for things to happen right now. We lose sight of the fact that things take time to build and things take time to grow. And it takes time to build a foundation, and a solid enough foundation so that we can build a nice high pyramid and a nice high structure on that foundation. And if we rush that foundation and we try to make things too high to start off with, it's like a house of cards and everything is going to collapse underneath it. And we have to have this appreciation and this knowledge that in order to get long-term results, we have to take a long-term mindset. We have to focus on stacking the little wins, the daily wins, the weekly wins. And that's something I do with a lot of my coaching clients. And to be fair, it's something that I lose track of myself all the time. I get this FOMO that I'm missing out and that I have to do things now. A lot of what we have will be there tomorrow. It will be there for us to come back to, and it will be there for us to keep chipping away on. And the next thing you know, you're 10 years into a business that you've been able to enjoy and you've been able to do what you love for that decade that leads me to a place where, and obviously I'm talking about myself here, it leads me to a place where I'm able to do things like this now. And I'm able to speak on topics like this. But I've been able to raise a family to this point and do things that I love, which I'm very, very thankful for. But during that 10 years, there's been a lot of times where I've had a short-term mindset and things have felt very overwhelming. It's felt like I haven't got anywhere. But when I look at the bigger picture, because I've had to put in the time and I've put in that effort, and the thing that I have kept doing is I've kept taking action every single day. I've kept taking action that is going to move myself forward. Doesn't matter whether it was from a business point of view, doesn't matter whether it's from a training point of view. I've kept showing up and I've kept taking action. Sometimes that action hasn't been the best, but I've kept coming back to it, and that's the thing. And this is something that I'm gaining more perspective on, the fact that things do take time. Now, do I believe we've got time? No, I think time runs out. And that's one thing that I'll probably talk about on another podcast. One mindset thing that I've really been battling with now that I'm approaching 40. And don't get me wrong, 40 isn't old. I feel great. I mean, when I must say, if I look at when I was in my 20s, like I look at somebody who was 40 and think like how fucking old they were, or even when I was in my late teens. And now it's like I still think I have a lot of life left ahead of me. But it also gives me the perspective on the other end of the spectrum that time's not finite, like it is going to run out. But things do take time, and taking that 5-year, 10-year mindset onto any change you want to make, even though it might seem completely overwhelming, it's an important perspective for a lot of people to look at. Because taking a very, very short-term approach for some people, when you're not understanding what you need to do on the back end to adapt that into your life, can be a recipe for failure. And that can cause a mental hole that becomes very, very hard to get out of. So focus on stacking those little wins. Daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. It will add up. Providing you are taking action every day, providing you are taking the right action for the result that you want, it will happen. But you need to take the action, and you need to continue to take the action past the 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, or whatever it is that has that short-term focus. So thanks for listening this week. Let me know if that's something, if you ebb and flow between those two things, that short-term to long-term focus. I know it's something I do in different aspects of my life, but anytime I have a short-term push, as I'm coming out of it, I always, now, I haven't in the past, it's been a mistake and I've had to learn from it, I always now, towards the end of that short-term push, start to look at how am I going to continue to adapt this, and then potentially understand that I may have to throttle my expectations a little bit because the actions that I'm taking are changing. So take care. Have a great week. If you want to book in a time to have a chat to see if one of our paid programs is a good fit for you, as I said, and with this podcast, a lot of what I do is about implementing long-term sustainable change, specifically around getting your health and athleticism back on track. There is a link in the show notes if you would like to book in a time. I can go through the programs that we have on offer, and hopefully you are a good fit and we can get you rolling, get you going from there. So thanks for listening this week. Appreciate each and every single one of you as always. Take care. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.